Right. We are live on another episode of Grace and Grit. I am Krista, the host, and today we have Liz Flores. She is an artist out of Chicago and one of my dear friends, someone I've known for a couple months now, but her story has been so inspiring to me. Something that she has been talking about most recently is this need for the made for more feeling. Liz was working a normal job, I would say, out of college when she had this tug that is, I am made to do something a little bit different, and now I just need to figure out what that is. And so I'm really excited for Liz to share her story today and tell us a little bit more about what that is and how she got into the artistic space and how she kind of recovered her creative journey. So Liz, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that we get to talk. And now after I did that very brief and probably pretty poor introduction of you, I would like to know something that I've had to deal with a lot is as I've transitioned into this new space and new role that I am doing, it's really hard to describe myself and to describe what I do. So my question to you is, how do you introduce yourself and how do you tell other people about what you're up to?
That was a really good introduction. I really liked it. But I like to tell people that I'm an artist and a storyteller. So like you said, I'm an artist from Chicago. I work out of the West Loop in a studio. I paint mostly like abstract paintings with some tribal design. And along with the paintings, I really like to document the process. And not just, the studio process that's happening, but the internal process that is happening in order to create the work. I think that that's just as important. So I really like showing, the end result, but also the steps that took to get to that point.
Incredible. So now I know that the artist side of you has just been being born most prominently over the last couple of months. And, we've talked a little bit about that transition point where you went from having the job that you were in to having that feeling of made for more. And I was just wondering about what that pivotal moment was when you actually knew you wanted to start diving into these new things and starting to listen to that internal voice to start creating art. Did you have one of those pivotal moments, and what was that? And then how did you just kind of keep going on that journey?
So I think it was like a series of feelings, like not like one specific moment. But it was definitely just right after college when I started my job. And I realized that if I didn't do anything, I would just be going to work and coming home like every single day. And that would be my life forever. And it just didn't feel right to me. So I had months of not feeling right. And that's what started this sort of pivot in my life to get back on track. And in terms of, like how did I go back to art? I mean, I was drawing throughout my childhood. I always liked art. I stopped doing art after high school because I went to college and, studied business. I never thought that there would be a career in art. And so I just never really thought about studying it or anything like that. But when I thought about like, what was I going to focus on if I wasn't going to do, my business career, I really just thought about like, what am I curious about? I think that like asking like, okay, business, maybe like this, insurance business isn't my passion. So what's my passion? It's like, oh my God, I don't know. Like, where do I start? I just thought about, okay, when was the last time I really felt like myself? When was the last time I felt really happy? When was the last time I was genuinely curious about something and I did it on the weekends, like in my free time? And the only thing that came up for me was art. And I didn't know what specifically, like, was it going to be painting, watercolor, sculpture? So I just started to dabble in a lot of things, but it was really basic. I mean, it was what you would call like a hobby or something like that. I was just looking for something else that was going to excite me and bring a little bit of like light back into my life.
So was it scary though, too, when you hit that moment and you said, okay, my business background, my business career probably isn't that thing that's going to excite me? but there is that artistic side. There's something that I want to discover there. Was that scary to kind of take that first step and start playing with this new medium and start playing with this new idea?
Yes. I think it was scary to say, like, okay, everything I studied, I really don't like it. You know, I was like, oh, wait, those 4 years? Oh, shoot. So it was, yeah, I felt like I didn't know anything about myself. That's how I felt, which is really daunting and scary, you know, when you're in your 20s and you're like, what have I been learning the past couple of years? So I think at first I didn't tell anybody that I was like dabbling in art or anything. And so that made it a little bit safer. But definitely when I started to get a little bit more aggressive with it and I started to show it on Instagram and Facebook, that's when the nerves really kicked in, because everyone is seeing it and you're starting to really show everyone your true colors. So that was really scary for me. But it was definitely hard to admit, like, oh yeah, I think I made a mistake. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And that's a really hard thing to say, but it's okay.
It's so true though. I think a lot of people really get challenged by the concept of, oh wow, I just spent 4 years of my life studying something and went through this whole process of going into a career, but there's something else that I'd rather be doing. Do I admit the mistake and make the change? Or do I kind of stick with what I had originally planned and, you know, try to do it as long as I can, but then ultimately maybe not be happy?
Right, exactly. And it's not like, okay, maybe you don't really like what you're doing. It doesn't mean quit your job and like, that's it. You know what I'm saying? I played with art for a long time while I was still at my job. And the job, I mean, the job helped with the art. The job financed the art for a good amount of time. So the job then had a different purpose, and you can rework it that way so that it feels better, and it doesn't feel like such a constriction in your life. But yeah, there's a lot of different paths you can take with that.
So I love that point, and I want to dig a little bit deeper on it, because I think a lot of people, you know, my journey was that I left my career and completely went onto the other side without having that foundation in place. And I think you played it maybe a little bit safer and smarter, probably, where you were able to play and experiment and to kind of build your trust in yourself and your ability to create this art while you had that stability of the job. And it almost creates a more positive, at least more sustainable and stable experience when you're going into this new world. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how you knew to take that path and how you knew to kind of start playing in the art space while you maintained the other job. What were your thoughts on that, and how did you know to kind of stick with both of them at the same time?
So when I first started playing around with art, I wasn't thinking like I'm going to eventually quit my job and be an artist. I still thought that there was no career in art, like people don't make money as artists or anything like that. It wasn't until I got on Instagram and I started posting artwork that I started to follow other artists, like from all over the world. And then I was like, wait a minute, like this person does art for a living? Like, wait a minute, that person like wrote a book, you know, that person illustrated a book, that person, you know, creates work for Target, like what? So I started to learn that there were so many different paths in art, and that I could access those if I really wanted to. And so but I was still conscious of the fact that, okay, it takes time. I do have bills to pay and student loans and stuff like that. But I started to position myself in a way where if I did quit my job, I wouldn't have a huge financial burden. You know, I did stay with my parents for like a year and a half, living with them while I worked my corporate job. So I was saving a lot in rent. And I worked hard to like pay off a bunch of like, you know, student loans and things like that so that I wouldn't need to worry about it after I quit my job. I mean, just like little things like that. I think I looked at a bunch of stories. I really researched stories of people that left people have left with nothing. People have left with 6 months worth of savings. People have gone straight to art. Some people still do art and their full-time job. And it's like, there's so many different things you can do. Like, and it's awesome that it's all open to us. So I just looked at it and I was like, well, what feels good to me? And then that's just the route that I decided to go.
Wow. And I think what's really cool about that is that you took the time to research and you took the time to figure out what would feel best for you and realize that you can move forward with it and you can make it kind of a career and something that you want to do full time. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Now, with that though, when you're first starting out, I know you've talked about experimentation and play and the solitude time that you took. And we know that kind of putting yourself out there for the first time and putting your work out there on Instagram and actually starting to get feedback from others, that's some scary shit. That's something that's like, oh gosh, what are people going to think? Did you go through that whole process when you were starting to play and experiment, or were you always just super confident in the work that you were putting out there?
Oh my God, no, I'm not super confident at all. I'm like nervous so much. I tend to be like a nervous wreck before a bunch of new things. So I was in a huge nervous wreck before I put my first post on it, like sitting there with the phone in my hand, and I'm like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And like the work, I mean, your first pieces, like they're not good, right? Like they're not great. I didn't expect to be like a Picasso or anything like that. So, but you have to put it out there, even if it's not good. You just share it. And so I struggled a lot with just being really scared a lot of the time. But the more you hit publish, post, print, whatever, the easier it becomes. It really is like a muscle that you strengthen. And it just gets easier and easier and to kind of like find your courage and put it out there. I will say that like a lot of other artists like really inspired me to do it too, because I saw other people that were being brave and it inspired me to be brave. Like I wanted to be like them. And so if you are struggling with that, find people that like inspire you, find people that you really look up to and that are doing it, like that are maybe like farther along. Because that is such inspiration. And when I felt like I couldn't do it, I would see these other writers and artists publishing things that were so vulnerable. And I was like, okay, I can post my picture of a lady on a train, you know? So yeah, that I did struggle with that, and I still struggle with that all the time.
I love your thought process on that though, your mindset of using them as a resource. Something that you said to me before was use those people as a mentor. Use them as a mentor, even if they are not an official formal mentor. They are people who are out there to inspire and to guide because they're putting themselves out there vulnerably. And so your mindset has been, well, why don't I look at them as inspiration as opposed to judging my work against theirs? Because a lot of times, especially when we're in a new career, we might see someone like that and we'll say, oh, my work's not as good as them, so I probably shouldn't put mine out there. But in all reality, if we can use them as that inspiration to post it, like you said, we're going to build more confidence and more courage the more and more we click post or put our words out there, or put our images out there. So I love your mindset on that.
Oh, thank you.
So I think one of the big things that you mentioned in your TED Talk that you did a couple months ago, right? Was it September?
Yes.
Amazing.
November.
November.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that you mentioned is that big change happens through small, consistent action, all taken from the heart. Can you talk a little bit even more about that and what that means to you and your work as you've gone through this process?
Yeah. So that was a huge lesson for me very early on. And I need to credit that lesson to the 100-Day Project that happened on Instagram. And it was started by an artist, El Luna. And she basically like rounded up a bunch of really cool creative people, and they did this 100-Day Project and invited other people to do it as well. And it's, you know, doing one action every day for 100 days and celebrating the process rather than the end result. And when I first started out, I really wanted to consistently work on my craft, but it was hard to like motivate myself and to have accountability. I didn't have any artistic or creative friends really in my group. So this was like my chance to kind of build like a little tribe online and to show my work and things like that. So I started just playing around with art every single day for 100 days to figure out what I like to do. So what type of art was going to be my thing. And it was so fantastic. I had such a good time with that project that I ended up doing another 100-day project. But that was when I saw the power of just 5 minutes every day. That was when I realized that you can do something. If you really want to do something, you can do it. You have 5 minutes. Okay. I have way more than 5 minutes every day. I think most of us have way more than 5 minutes every day. And I mean, in 100 days, I mean, when I saw like the body of work that I had, it was a little, mismatched and stuff like that, but it was my body of work. And when I saw from where I began to at the end, I had bought a studio, a freaking art studio in Chicago. By the end of these 100 days, I was like, holy crap. So it was really, really cool to see what would happen if I really stuck to something for that long. And if it was just like something so small, like sometimes it would just literally be 5 minutes before I went to bed, but it added up to so much. So that was where the consistent action that comes from the heart came. That was my big lesson that I learned from that project, and I take it every single day now. There are days when I really just feel like I can't draw, I can't do anything, and I just remember that. And it's even if I just draw a line, I celebrate it, and there you go. That's what I did today. So and it's easy to look at change happening when it's small like that, when it's small actions. Because if I would have just been in my office and thought about, man, I really don't like this job. Okay, I want to be an artist. Oh my God, like already just thinking about that right now, I'm having anxiety, like that's it's such a massive shift. But when you think, okay, I just want to like get better at drawing, I'm just going to draw like a cartoon character every day. That's way easier. No problem. No big deal. And little things start to happen. Like maybe you meet someone else that likes drawing, you put it on Instagram and people start commenting and liking your stuff. You see other cartoonists, you get other ideas, stuff snowballs. And that's where like change starts to pick up. So yeah, so I really, really liked that whole concept and that idea. So that's where that came from.
I think that's beautiful. And actually, the reason why I do this whole interview series is that grace and grit mentality, right? I think that when we talk about manifesting what we truly want, aka becoming an artist, we have to take those small actions and continuously do that again and again and again and keep working toward it. And then eventually we will start seeing those big changes happen. I think for you specifically, when you take those small actions, 100 days of artwork, whatever that is, whatever you can do that day, that 5 minutes, ends up you have your own studio, and now you did a TED Talk, and now you are going to move on and you have some shows coming up. So I think that's incredible that not only did you see it and you believed it and you kept kind of your mindset in the right place as much as you could, you also put the work in every single day, even if it was just 5 minutes to get to where you wanted to be.
Exactly. And it just makes it so much like so doable, because people are really busy, and I totally get that. And some people might be coming at this journey when they have kids and way more bills than like I have to worry about and stuff like that. And it just like seems really like daunting and scary, but like I know that people have like 5 minutes, build a little sandbox of time around that, and that's yours. And another thing that I would say is like put it in your calendar. I don't know why I don't put like anything fun in my calendar. I act like my calendar is like all to do, like really hard, boring stuff. And I don't know why I don't schedule in like painting and writing and stuff like that. So I've started doing that, and I did that with my 100-day project, and it really helped because it was like, this is what this time is for. And I really like the idea of like maybe setting a timer or something like that. Like if you're really stuck on time, and I'm a little like, I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to work on it for 20 minutes and then I'll sit there for like an hour. And so if I'm really stuck on time, I will set a timer, and it kind of helps you stay on track with things. But yeah, consistent action that comes from the heart. Totally. Everyone can do it.
It's that feel good moment when you just want to create something. You just want, for me, a lot of times it's writing or it's talking. If I can just create from that inspired feeling, the output is that much greater. And a lot of times it's hard to create that, especially if I schedule it in my calendar. You know, it's hard for me to know that I'm going to have that time and that inspired feeling right then and there. But oftentimes, if I just sit for long enough, it will happen, and it will just come out, and it's beautiful and it's amazing, and it just flows and works.
Yeah, I actually really understand that feeling. Like there were some days where I just didn't feel inspired. So I was like, I can't really like make anything. I don't feel anything right now. I had a friend tell me like, well, maybe you could use something to sort of catalyze yourself into that mode. So for me, like candles, tea, really anything warm, like a warm drink, puts me in like a really good mood. I don't know why. It just like soothes me a little bit, and I find it really easy to like draw. And so I will do that, and it's kind of like that's when I light the candle, that's the start of everything. And then when the 20 minutes is up, you know, blow out the candle and it's done. So if you do feel like that, you know, if you have like a set time when you're doing something, try to find something to sort of catalyze you into that mode, and that really helps. And it definitely helps if you are a traveler or something like that. If it's something that you can easily take with you, that makes such a difference.
Absolutely. I love the whole concept of almost processing it, like or putting a process around it, right? You light the candle, and your body and your mind immediately go to, oh, this is where I need to write, or this is where I need to create art. And now I'm going to do that for 20 minutes, and I'm going to get it done, and then I'm going to blow out the candle. And that's my meditative, peaceful time or work time to just get that done and feel that emotion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. What is that? Is it like Pavlov's dog, I believe, or something like that, where, you know, you ring the bell and the dog comes to create? Like we're just training ourselves to create the art.
Exactly. No, exactly. It is a process. Like, I mean, when you really gotta get stuff done, it's like, okay, I'm like waiting for the magic fairies to come to me. Like, they might not come, but you still gotta sit there and like work. You know what I'm saying? You just gotta do it. And eventually you're gonna hit something big.
I couldn't agree more.
They might come at one point and you'll have like a masterpiece. But you have to be there.
That's right. You have to be there. But that's when it comes down to just drawing the line. And like you said how, you know, doesn't matter how much time you have in the day, make it happen. If it's really something that you want to create, make that happen and sit there until you can at least just draw a line. Now you have a really interesting take on this too, because in your mind, you have this belief that art is supposed to be painful. And I think it would be difficult from your standpoint to differentiate the idea that artist is supposed to be painful from just like the fear of starting. And I almost wonder if there is something in there, a gem of knowledge or insight in there for other people who might experience that same thing, because the idea that art is painful or should be painful for you sometimes seems to be almost a catalyst for the work itself. But I guess more importantly, how do you differentiate between that feeling and the feeling of, oh gosh, I don't want to start, and just that, you know, more not as deep rooted emotion that you might feel, the fear?
Right. So, okay. So this is like, I don't think like all art needs to be painful. I think that there are times when you need to push through, and there are times when you don't. So I wouldn't say that like I have a belief that art needs to be painful. I've noticed like an issue with being a martyr and believing that, you know, I need to be like a starving artist for things to have a type of meaning. And I think we all have a little bit of a starving artist mentality. So I think that's where that's an issue that I realized when I was creating art, that like this little like little gremlin in my head was like, no, you got to be starving. You can't make money, blah, blah, blah. So, and I think that's, society telling us that and things like that. So I think the journey will be as painful as you make it to be. Yes, will it be hard? Of course. Anything meaningful, it's going to have its hard points. But I don't think I don't think you need to suffer through it. Like, I don't want to suffer. I feel like someone said that, and I don't remember who, but I don't want to suffer through this process. I don't want to go through my life suffering. That was the whole point of leaving a job that didn't serve me, was to not suffer anymore. So, art, I think it's a hard journey, and it has its lessons to teach you, and like anything does. But I think that if you're open to the lessons, they can be really great teachers. And if you see them as teachers, like, just see it as a lesson, like a wonderful lesson. Like, even if it goes technically bad, it's so different. You will feel it so differently. It won't feel like a failure. It's just a lesson. And redefining success has been a huge, huge, huge thing for me lately, because of this, idea that I had where I needed to suffer through everything. So when I gave that TEDx talk, I was like, right before I went on, I was like writing in my journal, and I was like, okay, success to me right now is like going up there, everyone loving it getting picked up by TED, millions of subscribers and viewers and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, okay, hold on a minute. Like, I can't control any of those factors, which means I'm already dooming myself. How about success is just I get up there and I say something, and that's it. So that's what I thought about. And I was like, okay, well, that's really easy. And so now I do that exercise before everything that really, really scares me. Is I write down what my current version of success is. And it's usually has to do with putting the power in someone else's hands. And then I write down, okay, new version of success, ... what is it? And so, for this interview, new version of success, just get on the computer and say hi and say anything. And boom, you're there. Like, already a successful interview. And it helps so much. And that's, again, is it going to be painful, or is it just going to be an experience? That's completely up to you. And so that's something that's been a really powerful learning experience. And I still work through those things a lot. But yes, but I don't think art needs to be painful. I think it's whatever we wish it to be.
Amazing. And thank you for that clarification, because what you just said is really powerful, I think, too, for people, which is redefining that level of success, or what is success, and not making that so much of a barrier that you don't even start. Because what you could have said is, getting on an interview and telling my story and opening up and being vulnerable and authentic is not something that I want to do. It's scary. Oh my gosh. And that's something I want, I want all these people to see it, but that's a barrier to just even starting. And so redefining that allows you to think about it in terms of a learning opportunity no matter what, and probably reduces that level of stress and the level of suffering while you're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And I also, something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and we've talked about this the last time, but is that growth mindset, the ability to, in every situation, in every scenario, whether you are succeeding or failing or falling down, or getting the 1 million views on YouTube, whatever that is, that it's a learning experience. And there's always room for growth. And there's always an opportunity to change the way that we experience our art and what we do with our time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I did watch that video about the growth mindset too.
Oh, did you? What did you think?
I loved it so much.
So for anyone watching, Tom Bilyeu on Inside Quest is doing some amazing work, and he's interviewing thought leaders from all over the mindset and mental and growth space. And it's just really helpful to hear what they have to say, especially if you're someone who is doing some type of artistic work or just trying to grow in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's some good stuff. Okay, so with your journey to this point, we've talked about how you've gotten to this point. We talked about how you got started. We talked about, how you've moved through some core beliefs that you once had and how you're still working with those today. Now, at some point, you've had to transition from the experimentation and the play to more of a professional setting so that you are making art that full-time career. How did you know when to make that change? Was that when you decided to leave your full-time job and move into, being the full-time artist? Are you still going through that, and how are you managing it?
Okay, this one's like really tricky because I have an issue with it. I have an issue with saying that we're transitioning from play and experimentation to being professional, because I don't think that we should ever transition away from play and experimentation. I think that like that's when we start to feel like, like this, like constricted again. And that's when, I mean, there is no more creativity, there is no play, there's no fun. And that again was something that I really struggled with when I quit my job, because I did feel like, okay, serious time. And what happened to the work was that it was like inspiration to now want to like come talk to me, because it wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't playful, it wasn't being professional to me sometimes feels like I can't make a mistake. I have to get it right. It feels like I got to put my suit on and like power suit my way into like the studio. And that can feel really constricted, and it feels like I'm going back to where I was. So I think that you need to be okay with being a beginner and a student all the time. And it's okay to be a student and still have like your professional pants on. And so you've caught me in like the time where I'm really like figuring out what that looks like for me, because I do have trouble with being super professional, but going way, way professional, and then being creative and like a beautiful, creative, goddess of art, and like not thinking about, finances and this and that. And I just want to play and not answer any emails. So I think you need to feed both sides. And I don't know like what that would look like for everybody, but for me, sometimes that's dedicating one day where it's no emails, no phones, play all day, like paint in the studio, paint whatever you want, throw things away on purpose and stuff like that. And then maybe it's dedicating other days to the stuff that's not so fun, answering emails, updating websites, stuff like that. So I don't think there's ever a transition though between the two. I think we learn to bring both of them together. And I think most people leave the creative sort of like play side. They leave it, somewhere else, because the world tells us that we need to be really serious in order to like get what we want. And I just don't think that that's the truth. So that's that.
Wow, wow, wow. I love that. And I think specifically one thing I did want to call out was that you said we should always be okay with being the student and learning. And I think so much of the play and the exciting side of it is just being that student and always being willing, like you said, to try it, see what happens, throw it out if you have to, but allow that process to still happen so that inspiration can, feel comfortable coming to say hello to you, which I loved. I'm like digging this idea of not even thinking about it as a transition, because you're right. I mean, this is something that I've experienced a lot as well, which is when, you start thinking about all the things that you want it to do for you, when you start thinking about the outcome and what you expect from it, it starts to limit your ability to be creative and to be authentic and to be vulnerable. And like you said, there's still time that needs to be dedicated and allocated for that real stuff and the harder stuff, the stuff that we don't necessarily want to do. But at the same time, that other time needs to be reserved, because we need to be the student. We need to continue playing and experimenting. We don't have to make that full transition.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like figuring out how the two sides can play together instead of like choosing. You don't have to choose. And people feel like I have to choose. But like, why do you have to choose? I don't want to choose. I want to be both. And yeah, so I like the idea of having both. Why can't I, have my cake and eat it too? Is that the expression?
Yes, and I truly believe that you can have your cake and eat it too. You just have to be smart about how you do it. Actually, so I even think about the people I look up to the most, you know, those really successful people who I admire and who have always inspired me. Like two that come to mind immediately are Oprah and Richard Branson. And if you look at those two, they are always, yes, they are super successful and dedicated to their careers. And I mean, they're just doing amazing stuff. But they're also very fun-loving, authentic, genuine, compassionate people who are always just testing new things and trying new stuff. And I'm sure it's just as hard for them going through new stuff as it is for us going through these beginning stages. But man, they've really been able to have their cake and eat it too as they've gone through that career. And that inspires me. If we even talk about what you said earlier with looking at people who inspire you and how they've been able to accomplish it.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, as we look to the future then, what's next? What's coming up? What do you see coming along the lines? I know you have an art show coming up in February. A big one, big exciting one. Can you talk a little bit about that and then what's beyond that?
Yeah. So there is an art show that will be happening at Navy Pier. It'll be February 10th at 7 p.m. And it'll be me and a bunch of other up-and-coming Chicago artists being exhibited by Raw. And they are an organization that they hold these like showcases all across the US and in some international countries, and basically show up-and-coming artists from all different types of disciplinaries. So there'll be visual art, photography, some music. I think there'll be some fashion and stuff like that. And I think there's like makeup artists and stuff too. So it should be really, really cool. But yeah, so that's coming up in November, my first show of the new year, and I'm really excited. And hopefully I'll have a new body of work to show at that. So you can check that out, and a link to that is in my website, lizfloresart.com. You can check out my work on there too, and you can check out the TED Talk that's on there. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I also post a ton of stuff on Instagram, a lot of studio shots and process shots and things like that. And that's at Lizito, Lizitto.
Beautiful. You actually answered my last question, which is so good. I'm so grateful that you are ahead of me.
Where you can find me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Instagram is like my home.
I just want to make sure that people go check her stuff out. I am continuously amazed by the work that she's doing. Liz is definitely a woman to watch and an artist to watch, and she's going to do some big stuff in her lifetime. So make sure you go check that out. Buy some paintings because they're gorgeous, and just keep an eye on her, people, and she's going to be amazing. So Liz, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited that I got to be a part of this journey and that I get to learn from you every single day. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I love learning from you.
Beautiful. All right, well, we're signing out for this episode of Grace and Grit, and we will be back with more at some other date and time, and we'll figure that out later. All right, thanks, everyone.